before that, I was a library director at a small rural library, and that's where I really got my grant writing experience started. So it's something that a lot of people don't go to school for. You don't really get a college degree from for getting for grant writing, but it's something you kind of learn along the way. So we hope to share all of our knowledge with you. I'm very fortunate to have a team, as Bree said. So I would like my teammates to introduce themselves, who will be helping to facilitate our workshop today. So I'm going to start with Sharima Bauer. Hi, Sharima, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Thank you very much, Eric, and good morning, everyone. It's great to be here. Yes, my name is Sharima Bauer, and I am the grant specialist on the team for our out-of-school time programs. If you've ever heard of Youth Quest or Teen Quest or the Summer Youth Initiative or Opportunity Youth, I write the grants for those programs. And so we serve young people all around Genesee County and specifically as well in the city of Flint. And so that is work that keeps me quite busy and work that I love. And my background is also in libraries, also a little bit of journalism and academia. And so I've been with the Chamber, the Flint and Genesee group, my apologies, for almost 2 years now. And so it's really exciting. It's great to be here today.
Thanks, Sharima. Another member of our team is James Michael Laney. James, why don't you introduce yourself as well?
Hello. Happy Tuesday, all. Yes, James Michael Laney. I'm from all around, but most recently I came here from San Antonio, Texas. I've been with the Flint and Genesee group for over 2 years now. I'm the research and data analyst, and essentially what I do is help the Chamber keep track of its metrics, ensure that the action groups and divisions are making progress towards their goals. Well, not making sure that they're making progress towards the goal, but that they're able to keep track of the progress that they're making towards their goals. And so my role in this will all make a little bit more sense as we get further into this Grants 101 process. But it's a pleasure to be with you all today. Thanks for having me.
Thanks, James. And lastly, the newest member of our team, Allison Newman. Go ahead and introduce yourself, Allison.
Hi, I'm Allison. Like Eric said, I'm the newest member to the team. I started only 6 months ago, but I'm taking this from the angle of I just took this course not too long ago, and I think I can help you all learn how to do it too, because it's really not as scary as it sounds. So a little bit about my background. I come from a strictly news background. So I've kind of hopped around. I worked at ABC 12, over at WILX in Lansing. Really just heavily focused on writing and telling stories. I specifically here at the group work in the economic development section, excuse me. So just really, taking properties and building them into what they can be, or helping your small businesses. It kind of encompasses everything you could think of economic development wise. So excited to be here today.
Thanks, everyone. So that's the team, the grant writing team at the Flint Genesee Group. We manage anywhere between 50 and 70 grants a year when we are grant seeking. So that's why we have numerous people on our team, and we cover a variety of different things, like we said, from economic development to after school, to tourism, to our traditional chamber membership division as well. So we help support those groups and do the great work that they do in our community and our county. All right, so let's get the slide deck up. There we go. And our course is 3 hours. It will go the whole time, and we will take time for a break. So we will get to that point about midway through. So thank you for joining us. We are going to go over Grants 101 this morning, which is a very basic introductory course into grant writing. We're going to go over some components of what grant writing looks like and what a grant proposal looks like as well. Let's go to the next slide, please. So we sent out a worksheet ahead of time. If you were able to fill that out, great. If not, if you want to go ahead and take a look at it right now while we're getting a few things out of the way. you can go ahead and do that. We're going to use this for an activity later in the workshop, and we want you to fill it out. We realize that most of you are coming from some kind of organization, a nonprofit or a business. So go ahead and use that as an example, because in the activity, we're going to have an opportunity to network and chat with each other. So it's helpful if you use a real world example. And if you don't have one, that's fine. Go ahead and just fill it in with a hypothetical if you are just kind of getting into this and exploring. All right, next slide, please. And that's who we were, and we already did our introductions. And so today, what we are going to cover in our agenda, we are going to have a small inclusion activity right off the bat. We're going to go over grants, what they are and what they are not. So it's really helpful, I think, to always start off with what is a grant and what isn't a grant. We're going to go over funder identification. So how do you research and identify potential funders for your project or your organization? After that, we're going to have our breakout session where we're going to go over our activity and get into that worksheet that you have already completed or that you are working on currently. And then we're going to go over some really common components of grants. What are the supporting documents? What does a budget look like? We're going to go over why proposals fail. What are some common mistakes that people make that you can keep an eye out for, and some tips that you can use when submitting that final draft. And then lastly, we're going to have an activity where we play fund or not fund. Well, where you will be the program officer, and we'll look at some examples and kind of do some quick scoring and critiquing on some grant proposals that we have available, for example. And then lastly, we'll have Q&A. But if you would like to ask a question at any time, go ahead and put that in the chat. Bree is going to be watching, and also with our teammates who are going to be also keeping an eye on that as well. So next slide, please. So we're going to get you working in that chat right away. So we want to get an idea, get a sense of where you're at in this process. Have you ever written a grant before? If you have, go ahead and say yes in the chat. And in writing a grant doesn't mean that had to be awarded, just meaning that you've submitted a proposal. So if you've done that before, please say yes. And if you haven't, go ahead and say no. And it looked like we had a few yeses and a lot more no's. So good. We hope those of you that have written a grant before will pick up some new tips and maybe learn something new, or just get a good refresher on the process. And being that there's a lot of people here for their first time, we hope that you kind of look at this as a great introduction into grant writing and what that looks like, the whole process from start to finish. All right, so next slide, please. So we want to know also, why are you interested in learning about writing grants? So first, if you are writing for work, or this is something that you have to do as part of your job, we'd like you to write the word business in the chat. Or if you are looking to volunteer for an organization that you work with that maybe does not have a grant writer, or is a very grassroots organization that hasn't really gotten started very much yet, go ahead and write volunteer. So business, it's something you have to do for your job, or volunteer, it's something that you want to do for, your favorite nonprofit, or something that you do for volunteering on the side. And it looks like most of us are looking at doing this for work, with a few people who are doing this as a volunteer type of activity. So that's good. So I do want to say one quick thing too about the word business. This presentation will be very focused on the nonprofit perspectives of grant writing. So we are taking this from the way we write grants in the world. We're a nonprofit at the group, and we write grants that way. Grants can also, right now, is very popular because of the COVID and pandemic, that Small business grants are very prevalent. And so that is pretty much the same process. So if you're here from a business, we're welcome to have you. It's pretty much going to be the same type of way that you go about doing grant writing. But I will say from the business side of things, if you're applying as a business, this is more of a transactional type activity. So you're going to be not necessarily forming that relationship with your funder. You're more or less just going to be writing out an application, filling it in with your most truthful, best information, and submitting it that way. It's more of like applying for a loan as applying to a grant. In the grant world for nonprofits, it's about forming those relationships, whereas a business, it's more about making sure that you are filling in the paperwork properly. Are there any questions so far before we get into the real meat of the presentation? All right, well, I'm going to go ahead and hand it off to James Michael to start us off with a quick activity.
Okay, thank you, Eric. Again, everybody, thank you for being here. Gonna just get our bodies or our hands moving a little bit, hopefully get that blood pumping. If everybody could do me a favor and get a piece of paper, something to scribble on, and something to scribble with, a writing utensil. And what we're going to be doing here is a fun little activity called Squiggle Birds. Some of you may be familiar with this, others may not. So I'm just going to explain it as though nobody knows. Squiggle Birds is just a fun activity that I'm going to be using to help teach us, I guess, create the analogy between the messy world of grant writing, or how messy grant writing could be, and the art that it actually is. So to start off, grant writing has some pretty basic components to it, and we'll cover those later on. But before we start doing the grant writing, we have all these little pieces. We have a budget, we have a team, we have a dream, an idea, and all these things can just be stuck up in the air, kind of jumbled together in a mess. We don't really know what to do with them. So to represent those, I would like you all to draw a scribble like so. Now, this isn't like the most elegant looking scribble, but usually before we start writing a grant, we don't have everything put together. So everything isn't usually elegant in the preparation. But as we start looking over the grant proposal, as we start familiarizing ourselves with what the funders are asking, we recognize that there are some basic components. Every bird, for instance, has 2 legs. Boop, 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 boop. Every bird has 2 legs. So my squiggle is starting to take shape. Every bird also has a beak and an eye. Oh, look, it's a bird. And then every bird has like a little, I'm going to draw tail feathers. Boom. So I don't know what species this is. We can call it the Grants 101 bird. But what I would ask you all to do is consider, if you're feeling any trepidations, any fears, any nervousness or tensions around grant writing, I'd just like you to scribble those all away first off. And remember that it's a very linear process. You just follow some directions, write out what is being sought after, and provide what they're looking for. And you'll end up with turning all these messy pieces and transforming them into some beautiful artistic piece, which is your final proposal. And I'm hopeful that by the end of this class, you'll be able to take all the different components that you have just lying about your office and in your organization and bring them all together to create a very strong proposal to get you all funds and keep doing the good work. Does anybody have any birds that they'd like to share? Did anybody make a bird? I was just curious. I just kind of went through it, but I would love to see if anybody had any animals. And I would say that this isn't necessarily restricted to birds. Bears have ears and eyes and paws. Snakes have little tongues and eyes.
James Michael, I think LaShonda Brown was just showing us her bird. Do you want to put that back up in front? Oh, Awesome.
Oh, wait a second. Hold it up and we'll pin. Oh, I can't pin you, but I was going to spotlight you. That looks very nice. Thank you. Very nice. Appreciate you sharing that. All right. Well then, if we could go to the next slide. And I'll pass it on to Allison to give us a little overview about what grants are and maybe what grants are not.
Thank you, James Michael. I'm glad we're all very creative artists now. So now we're going to kind of move into like what James Michael said, what grants are and what they're not. And this is going to be a really brief kind of general intro into what you might see or end up looking for when you are creating a grant proposal. Before we get into that, some of you might not actually, and even I'll admit, I didn't know exactly what a grant was. A lot of people kind of associate it with you need something or you need money to purchase something. Oh, well, you can write a grant for that. And it's not exactly like that. One of the example we're going to use throughout the whole course today is going to be the example of a park. So anytime we're kind of referencing different parts of what a grant is and parts of a grant, we're going to reference this park. So say you have this park and you want to get some new sporting equipment, or you need a new goal, or you need some wood chips. You might write a grant to get those things or to get those services. Now, say your neighbor down the road is like, oh, I want that stuff in my backyard, I should write a grant for that. It doesn't work that way. Grants don't work for personal reasons in that manner. So what you didn't necessarily maybe realize was that getting those different services or items for that park actually served a greater purpose. And that purpose could have been reducing blight, improving public safety, adding more indoor or outdoor recreation opportunities for kids and adults. It's not just, oh, I need things, I want things, let's get things. So moving on into exactly what grants are. Grants are going to be non-refundable, or non-repayable funds or products that are given to you by a government department, a large corporation, sometimes funds, trusts, and they're given to a recipient, often a nonprofit like what we're talking about today, or an educational institution. Additionally, once funded, an agreement or a contract is developed between the funder and the grantee. And what that's going to do is just lay out the lay of the land for what your proposal is going to be, including like specific services, exactly what programs you're going to do, and how long the projects are going to take. You're going to solidify a time frame. Common components of a grant are going to be a detailed background of who your organization is and what they do for your community, who they serve. You could add in a pretty lengthy background, even historical background is important sometimes. And also think about, kind of the past impact your organization or group may have had in your area. One of the other things that we encourage and I kind of love is a lot of these proposals really need data. And data, you would be amazed on what data can do to kind of really just amp up your proposal and really prove why your proposal should be funded. And we later on are going to explain some more data sources you can find and utilize. So we'll do that a little later in the presentation. Something else you might want to consider is geographically and demographically, who is this proposal going to serve? And that kind of has an umbrella effect in a way. So what I mean by that is you could be looking at certain age groups. You could be looking at age groups within an age group. You could be looking at, on a map, X street to X street, or even an entire county. It's really fitting to your purpose. But as long as you can identify who you are going to help, that's just going to help solidify and make specific what your funder, potential funder is going, or who and what they are going to help. You're also going to want to be specific, like I said, in that area of focus of what you're trying to work on. So that, running back to that example that we were using, we want to fix parks, or we want to add we want to add new equipment. It could also be, you know, we want to go fix roads, or we want to help small businesses, that kind of thing. So if we can move on to the next slide, we're going to go over what grants are not. So grants are not the same as funding, but they are a way to, or excuse me, they're not the same as fundraising, but they are a way to achieve fundraising. But what you need to know is that grants are often very time specific. And what we mean by that is they have different cycles in which they release different grants, and you have to have specific program periods, and that might not align with your overall fundraising or strategy plan. So you need to pay very close attention when you're looking at grant proposals and what's called RFPs. You need to be very careful in reading and making sure that you can actually follow the timeline that they're proposing. Grants are also not guaranteed, and you're not entitled to get one. Your organization or your cause, and that could be because the funder's focus area or geography, they might not align, but also grants are super competitive. I can tell you, you know, I'm not trying to scare you away, but you're not the only one applying for that grant. 100%, you're definitely not. But that doesn't mean don't try. Grants are also not free money. Like we said before, you're going to have an agreement or a contract, and that's going to be your binding document that says, yes, you are going to carry out this service or program or project. And there are also going to be several things that you're going to have to demonstrate, such as matching funds, and, you know, whether that's going to be in kind or cash match. And you're also may have to pay back grant funds if the funder deems that their contribution was not used properly or in full. So it's just elements of the contract that you need to be aware of. Typically, grants are not going to be used for general purposes. Again, coming back to this park, you're not going to really be able to write a grant and say, I just want to fix a park. Well, how are you going to fix that park? What are you going to do specifically? So you need to think, you know, at the minuscule level, what am I going to do? Well, how many pounds of wood chips am I going to need to buy to fix what area of space? As we've mentioned also, grants are not going to be for individuals or for profits or religious entities. We're looking at nonprofits here, 501c3 tax exempt organizations. And then also finally, the grants are not going to be able to be used to pay debts or for past projects. So unfortunately, you know, say you did fix your park last year, well, you can't write a grant for it this year to pay for it. You have to be thinking forward when it comes to grants. And you can move on to the next slide.
All right, thank you so much, Allison. That was great. So now we'll take a look at funder identification. And now that you know what grants are and what they are not, the next thing you'll probably want to know is how to find grant makers and funders. So the following are some strategies we recommend for identifying potential funders. Learn to love email lists. I know, they glut your inbox, but sometimes some of those emails are very, very useful. Bree, can we pull up the first point, please? Thank you. I think we'll need to go down slightly another one. Thank you very much. Great. And then one more for our email lists. All right. So our RFP bulletin, RFP of course stands for request for proposal. And you can bring these up, Bree, as I mentioned them. Also, another one, we've got Grant Space. We've also got the Center for Nonprofit Excellence. We also have the Foundation Center, or the Philanthropy News Digest. We've got grants.gov, which I'll talk about in a minute. We've also got we have the Council of Michigan Foundations, and we've also got foundations that you may be thinking about that might be a potential match for you, for your project or your program that you would like to have funded. So these are, and you can get on their listservs when you just reach out to them on their website and indicate that you would like to have your email address added, and then they will notify you when they have opportunities available. So you'll want to search often. New opportunities are becoming available all the time, and it helps to have a specific project or program in mind before you start looking. Bree, if you want to go ahead and just put all of the points up on the screen, that is great. It will end with creating a system. Thank you so much. So new opportunities are becoming available all the time. And so as Allison said, you'll want to start by being focused and having something specific in mind. Finding general operating funds can be more difficult than finding funds for a specific focus area. If something isn't the perfect fit right now, feel free to bookmark it on your browser or on a Post-it note, whatever system works for you, so that you can come back to it. And you want to have those ideas that you want to keep building your ideas and have them in your back pocket in case an opportunity fits with something better in the future. So create a tracking system that helps you keep track of funders that you're going to want to take a closer look at, either in the present or in the coming future. Funders that you've explored and are a good fit for your organization, that might be a possibility, and you'll want to check back on your list periodically. Next slide, please. And the way that you do this is via research. So there are local, state, and federal grant opportunities. So amongst the federal grants, you can go to usa.gov/grants, where you can create an account and receive email notifications of grant opportunities. You can also go to grants.gov, and that now has a mobile app. You can do state and local grants. Some examples of state grants might include the Michigan Community Service Commission at the Department of Health and Human Services, which has a grants page that lists foundations and funders that are Michigan specific. You can go to the Michigan Department of Education, or the MDE, which sometimes has grants available. If you head over to michigan.grantwatch.com, you'll find grants for across the state. And the Council of Michigan Foundations, or www.michiganfoundations.org, also will have listings and of foundations that you can research. There's also the Foundation Directory Online and the Michigan Nonprofit Association. Bree, if you want to pull up some more of those points there, that would be great. So in terms of researching, you'll just want to go online and using your favorite search engine to get specific and identify foundations that are linked to specific organizations and or causes. Now, keep in mind your local libraries. The Francis Wilson Thompson Library at the University of Michigan Flint holds the subscription for our region for the Foundation Directory Online. And that link down there at the bottom for the Foundation Directory, that is the link that the librarians provided for us to share with you, to reach out to them, and you can set up an appointment and they will welcome you in to have a look. That is a search that has to be done there on premises. So, and also don't forget about the Flint Public Library and Genesee District Library. Their librarians they have research librarians who are there to assist in any kind of research that you may want to conduct, and in finding potential fits for your project or program. All right, next slide, please. So concerning eligibility, there are some basic and common eligibility guidelines that are nearly universal. For instance, you must be a tax exempt or have tax exempt status or 501c3 status. That is where the IRS recognizes you as a nonprofit. But don't fear if you don't have that or if you're working towards it. You can also obtain a fiscal sponsor or a fiduciary. Those terms they tend to be interchangeable. And what a fiscal sponsor or a fiduciary will do is, if you have a particular program or project that you are wanting to have funded, you've identified your potential foundation that you want to reach out to, or your funder, you've identified all the different things that you want to have, you're in the middle of you're going to be getting everything together for your grant, and you may identify another organization who does hold 501c3 status. This will be a nonprofit, and who maybe is in alignment or maybe is complementary to the project or program that you would like to have funded. Perhaps you share a common vision or a common mission. And so you may approach them and ask them, if they will agree to be your fiscal sponsor for this particular endeavor. And then you will have an MOU, a memorandum of understanding between the two of you as to how those funds will be dispersed. And then the check would come to them, and the MOU between you would ensure that those funds are given to you for your endeavor. And so we also talk a little bit more about fiscal sponsors and fiduciaries in Grants 201. And two. And so, and just a few, and as Allison has mentioned, no grants to individuals, for-profit businesses, no grants for political candidates or organizations that are known for proselytizing or excluding individuals based on religious beliefs. Geographical limitations are common. For instance, if you were to go to the michigan.grantwatch.com, and you will see, as I mentioned, a plethora of grants for the entire state. That is, you'll want to be sure that you are looking at the ones that are specific to your location. So those might be for Southeastern Michigan. They might be for Genesee County specifically, or even the Flint area. And so you want to always check that. When you're doing your research, a few things that will help cull the research and make it happen quickly is if you go to their geographical limitations for those particular funders. Just check that out. And another piece that's really helpful is if you check out what they don't fund. One time I was writing a grant, this was a couple of years ago, I was writing a grant for an organization here in the area, and they wanted 15 computers to start a computer lab. And they gave me a list of particular funders that they had identified. And so I tackled the list. And one thing that helped me cull through that quickly, I went to one particular one, listed what we don't fund, computers at the very top of the list. And so you can quickly go through a list just looking at what we don't fund. And that's usually on their websites. Another piece, equal opportunity employers only. Sometimes there are requirements about having a board of directors. We'll talk a little bit more about that later on in our supporting documents. And it's fairly common to request demonstration of fiscal administrative capacity and stability, which we're going to get into shortly. Some funders will have requirements about how long your organization has been established. And that's another reason why you may have a fiscal sponsor or fiduciary, especially someone else who is more established in the community. We talked about before, some grants won't cover administrative costs. They may not fund materials, and you certainly cannot get one to pay off a debt or a loan, unfortunately. And some will not fund local affiliates of national organizations. And so now some foundations will not accept unsolicited proposals, but they do go through a letter of inquiry, or also called a letter of intent. And what happens with that is you go on their website and they will tell you their process. And they will usually provide a template for you to create your letter of inquiry or letter of intent. And then you can just follow the instructions on that. And that's what introduces you to the foundation. And so they can see what your project or program is, and they can tell you, yeah, this is a good fit. We're going to kick it over to this program officer. Or they may say, thank you, but this isn't a good fit for us at this time. And then you can move onward. So, and sometimes just know the limit on the number of applications that you can submit per year. And usually there's no grants for indirect costs or institutional overhead. We're going to talk a little bit about that when we get to the budgets. And no funding for general fundraising drives, endowments, or government agencies. Allison touched on this in terms of the fundraising. That is a different way of getting awards or funds. You may have, a community fundraising drive, or for endowments or bequeathments. Perhaps you might do some marketing and encourage members of the community to remember you in their will, remember your nonprofit in their will. So those are outside of grants. And all right, are there any questions so far on what we've covered here? All right, well, if there are no questions, then we will move onward to our next slide and take it away.
All right, thanks, Sharima. So we are going to get into our activity, which we had you fill out your worksheets for. So what we're going to do is we're going to have Bree put us into breakout rooms, and you'll have one of the team members in your breakout room with you. What we'd like you to do is have your worksheet completed and ready to share. So what we want you to do is share your grant idea or just talk a little bit about your nonprofit or the organization that you come from and share it with other folks in the room. That way we can kind of create a networking opportunity. That way you have an opportunity to practice your elevator pitch on your organization or your project. And then maybe talk a little bit about what you've learned so far or what you're hoping to learn through the rest of the presentation. So we'll do that. We'll take about 15 minutes to go through this exercise. And then once we're done, we'll have our first break. So stay with us. We'll get through putting us into the breakout rooms here just shortly, and we'll be off and running. So thanks, and we'll be seeing you in our breakout rooms. All right, well, that was a very quick 15 minutes. We're back together, everyone. So we hope that you had a chance to share and talk about your organization, your project, your program, and hopefully our teammates were able to give you some advice and some tips based off of what you said. What we're going to do right now is quickly debrief. So would anyone really like to share something that they've taken away so far from this presentation so far, or something they picked up in the breakout session? Or if you just want to quickly just share about your organization with the whole group, we'll take a little bit of time to go over that. So are there any volunteers? Victoria, I see your hand up. You want to come off mute?
So in the breakout session, I'm with the program Equine Escape, which is out in Goodrich, and it is a equine assisted learning and equine assisted psychotherapy program. And one of the things that she had said was that it was easy enough to just put in equine assisted learning funding and be able to possibly come up with people who would be willing, finding grants that way. And I didn't realize it was almost that easy to be able to just Google that. Because I'm completely new to grant writing. I literally started considering it 2 weeks ago. The owner of Equine Escape kind of came to me and asked me if it would be something I'd be interested in. So I'm have no clue which direction to go, how to go about it. And so that was a pretty interesting thing that it was that easy to be able to just kind of type that into Google and see what comes up. So that was interesting.
Yeah, exactly. I think we talked about that in my mini session too, is that researching is a really great tool to identify funders that are specifically looking to fund very specific programs. So if there is a funder out there that's looking to support equine therapies or medical assistance for, based off of utilizing horses, that would be a great thing to put into a search engine and get very specific funders. You might have a little trouble finding one locally or something geographically in Michigan, but there may be a national organization out there that does support that kind of work. And then another thing that I was just getting to in my mini session group was talking about partnerships. So think about different organizations that maybe you might be able to partner with that could bring people out to your location, or maybe you could bring horses to their location to outreach and bring more impact to other people. And funders look at partnerships much greater too. Would anyone else like to share? All right, going once, going twice. All right. So what we're going to do first is we're going to take a quick 15-minute break, and then we'll be back in 15 minutes and we'll resume our presentation. All All right, Reed, you want to go to the next slide for me, please? Thank you. All right, well, welcome back. I hope you had a chance to refresh your coffee and get a little breakfast in you, maybe. We're going to start the next section of our presentation, and we're really going to start digging into the actual components of a grant proposal. So that's where we're going to start off first. So we have our slide up here with a presentation of food ready to go, ready to be cooked. This picture was taken by James Michael as he was getting ready to make, I think, some kind of lemon chicken dish. But we use this photo to illustrate that you should really do a lot of preparation before beginning to write your grant proposal. Get everything you need ready to go so that you can go ahead and just sit there and get the pieces written down. And so I think they call this mise en place in French, in terms of getting all of the things you need, everything in its place. So we will go over that. So basically, these are the common components of a grant proposal. If you were going to do an outline of a grant, this is what it would look like. It would go, in this order as well. Like this is the way you would structure your actual document. So, and we'll go over each one of these very specifically, but I'll give you a quick overview of what each section is. So your proposal summary is going to be your executive summary, your overview of the entire grant, your introduction to the organization. So you're going to describe your organization to the funder, its history, its impact in the community, and the mission and vision and values of that organization. You're going to identify the problem, and that's called a problem statement, or sometimes also known as a needs statement. And this is where you're going to utilize that data that your organization has on hand or is researching and getting in from the community on why is there a problem that needs to be fixed? What is going on that needs to be addressed in your community or in your neighborhood? What is it that needs to be tackled? Is it a blight problem? Is it public safety? Is it an education issue? What is it that you're trying to work on from this grant? Then from there, you're going to go into the project objectives, which is, what are we trying to impact in the community? What are we trying to do to that problem, that need statement? So that would be your overall overreaching objectives that you are trying to achieve. It's not the activities that you're going to do, but it's the main goal. So in our park statement, or our park example, you're not just building a park to build a park. The reason why you're building a park is to improve public safety, provide children a safe place to play, increasing usage or recreational opportunities. That's the objectives. And then the actual building of the park are the activities that you're going to do to get to those objectives. And speaking of activities, that's where you would list it. You would list those activities in the project methods and design. So here's where you're going to outline what it is you're going to do with that project. How are you going to achieve those objectives, and how are you going to address the needs statement? Project evaluation is going to describe to the funder how you're going to show that your work has made an impact in the community. Basically, and there's multiple types of evaluation, but you need to do evaluation ahead of time so that you know that there is a problem or a need. The evaluation during, that says that we're keeping track of what it is that we are currently doing and do we need to course correct. And then the evaluation at the end that shows your funder that, yes, we increased foot traffic to this park, 200%, or the lighting in the park is, has been increased to support better public safety, whatever that could be. You're also going to identify future funding and your sustainability plan for your organization. So once the project is done for this year, do you have the resources to do it again next year, or to keep doing the work that you're doing? And is your organization on track to keep to stay afloat, especially in these times right now? And then lastly, you're going to describe the expenses that you're going to have because of this grant. So, very detailed and very descriptive, putting together a budget that shows exactly to the penny where are all the funds going to support this project or program. Next slide, please. So the proposal summary, and this is, we're going to get into the nitty gritty of each one of those sections. And this is just a very quick summary of the entire narrative of the entire document. So, and sometimes it's called an executive summary, and that should be everything you need to know about the project consolidated and concise into a couple paragraphs. And I typically save this part for the very end of the writing process. So that way I can write the whole grant, and then I go back and I write that executive summary now that I know what I've written and I've kind of vetted it a little bit with other eyes being able to see it. And now I can write that executive summary now that I have all the work done. And it's going to be at the very beginning of your proposal. And that's just going to outline the main program objectives. What's the overall goal? What are you trying to achieve? And then gives just a very quick view of information for the reader. So the reader should be able to read this couple of paragraphs, this section, and really understand what the whole project entails. Are there any questions so far? All right, well, I'm going to go on and hand it over to Sharima.
All right, thank you very much, Eric. So this is where you introduce yourself to the funder, and you want to share about your history, where you are located, and your mission, your vision, and values, because you want to connect with the funder. Now, you will have already done your research, and so you know that this is a good connection for you. This funder is a good connection for your program or your project. So then you will share with them how your mission, vision, and values align with theirs. Because you've done your research, you already know how they align. And so you can write in convincing ways that the funder will see that alignment as well. So this is when you will establish your credibility. And this is your time to shine. Don't hold back. Share about your successes, the programs that you're spearheading or involved in within your community, the ways that your organization is involved in the community. Perhaps your organization has received any awards, some awards for your work in the community, any metrics that you can share about how many individuals you served in the last year, and maybe you were up 5 more or 500 more than last year. Those are the kind of things that you want to share, all of your successes. Your needs statement is going to list your data, your facts, and stories. And so in terms of data, there's a few that I like to use, I can recommend. One, if you are doing any work in North Flint, then the Ruth Mott Foundation has the North Flint Community Dashboard. And that is a wonderful resource that you can readily go to for information to be able to share in your needs statement. Another source, if you're working with children or young people, especially in terms of K-12, then the My School Data at mysschooldata.org is an excellent resource. I use that all the time. That's my, as in the acronym for Michigan, MI, schooldata.org. And then of course, there's always the US Census. And the census is a wonderful tool for so many different things. I may use it to grab household median incomes for a certain year. I use it for demographics in our area in terms of race and ethnicity, in terms of age, gender, so on and so forth. And so the US Census is always great. And that's where you can really flesh out the socioeconomic context of the community. You also want to look at external influences, such as the economy, the environment. I'm going to share with you just one example in terms of how you might kind of work with your needs statement to show what was and what now is. We know that in Flint, that 21st century Flint looks very different from 20th century Flint, such as 100 years ago, 50 years ago. We know that it looks very different, especially due to deindustrialization. And so there are ways that you can tell that story. So for instance, they're located in Flint's historic Civic Park neighborhood, which, as you may know, celebrated 100 years in 2019. There is an initiative to unearth a hidden park, quote unquote. So this story came from a Flint Side article that was dated on June 5th, 2019. about Hidden Park and the woman who adopted it with the hope of resurrecting this green space for local families to come for respite and rejuvenation. Because it is hidden, it has been taken over by the land and is now, in fact, a nature preserve. Originally known as Doherty Park, it was a gift to the city of Flint from the General Motors Modern Housing Corporation in 1924. The park, which even from its very formation was considered a hidden park because of the trees that spread their branches to conceal the park, was created already as a community space. When built, it was surrounded by family homes sold to General Motors workers. Historical City of Flint Parks reports show that in 1929, Doherty Park was a children's park decked with 2 tennis courts, playground equipment, a fence was added in the 1940s, a baseball field was added in the 1950s. Old newspaper articles refer to the park as Civic Park's hidden gem, a challenge to outsiders to locate, although it is located on North Chevrolet Avenue between Stockdale and Patterson Streets. Like the whole neighborhood, though, Doherty Park long flourished, and it also suffered decades of neglect. The park shrank over time and its maintenance dwindled until it was non-existent. Today, there are only clues to its former major attractions, such as evidence of the pavilion that remains in the cement foundation smothered in the overgrowth of shrubbery on the far side of the park. So this is a way that you might construct a needs statement in talking about what was and what now is. Because what's going to happen is once your needs statement is constructed, showing data and showing the story, and I also mentioned the other sources there, old newspaper articles, old records. And so going back into those, you can construct your story. Because what will happen next comes your grant narrative and everything beyond that. And that is where you're going to talk about how your program or project is going to be a community good, because it will speak to that need that you are building there for the funder to see. All right, thank you very much. Next slide, please. James Michael.
So Sharima covered this already, but the problem statement, need statement, interchangeable terms, more or less. But here you have a senior mechanic speaking to a junior mechanic and saying, if all you have is a whatchamacallit, then everything, every problem looks like a thingamajig. And it's kind of alluding to the saying, if all you have is a hammer, then every problem looks like a nail. The reason I use this is just to kind of stress the fact that you're not trying to make your program fit a problem. Also, you're not a solution looking for a problem to solve. You are who you are. You are your organization, and you are providing a service to your target population. So look for the you have a solution to a problem that is affecting a specific group of people, So have some wherewithal about what you do, what you can do, what tools you have at your disposal, and apply those to the right circumstances. Could we go to the next slide, please? So if there are any questions, I can always take them, by the way. Also, if you have any questions, just shout them out, because I'm not seeing everybody at the same time. So we have the right tool. So we've gone through our executive summary. We've gone through our history or background, our problem and needs statement. So we got the right tools and we know the right job. So we just need to use these things the right way. Bree, if you could just click through all of these so that SMART is showing. So basically what we're doing here is we want to make sure we want to let the funder know what the objectives of our project are. Every good objective, every helpful objective is SMART. And SMART is an acronym for specific. So we're helping a park. We're not just doing anything. We are working on improving a park. It has to be measurable. So we're not just doing work all willy-nilly and then, hey, 5 hours has passed, 8 hours has passed, or a year has passed. Good job, everybody. High five, pats on the back. No, it needs to be measured what we've done, the hours of activity that have been taken care of, the days of participation in the program, the attendance at the park before and after. Attainable. Your objective might be something that is unattainable. I use the example of boiling the ocean as opposed to boiling a cup of water. Or in this word, or in this example of the park, maybe planting a tree, a single tree, instead of planting a whole forest. You can tell your funder that you want, $100,000 to plant 1 million trees in the Genesee Commons or Chevy Commons, but that's not realistic, nor is it attainable. So going on to realistic, yeah, make sure your objectives are realistic. Like I said, we're not trying to plant a forest, we're not trying to boil an ocean, we're trying to do easily, observably, objectively measurable and specific activities. And then finally, it needs to be time bound. No projects going on in perpetuity. Funders don't want to be married to you. They just want a quick relationship. And if it's a good one, then it might go into the long term, like 5 years plus. But ideally, your projects, I mean, for the most part, projects don't last more than a school year or 2 years. And then the grant is over after 2 years, and then you can reapply again, maybe the next funding cycle or immediately, depending on what they said. So just make sure that your objectives are related to the goals. And when you make sure that your objectives are SMART, again, I'm going to reiterate specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and time bound, then you're answering the question of, could you click one more, Brie? Oop, again, there you go. You're explaining to the funder how exactly you intend to have your project or your program affect a change. So going back to the park example again, we could maybe say that we want to increase attendance at the park. Like that could be an objective. Like we want to increase attendance at the park this summer by 10% more than what we had last year. I feel like that statement right there is something that is specific, it is measurable, it's attainable, it's realistic, and it's bound to a summer. Does anybody have any questions about setting or creating SMART objectives, SMART goals? Great, excellent. I feel like I had one more thing I wanted to say about this, but we can go on. All right, so now that the funder knows that you all are thinking smartly and they've seen your plan kind of briefly described, they want you to go into a little bit more detail about what your program does exactly. So I'm going to continue with my SMART example of increasing park attendance by 10% in this summer from last year. That's one of our core objectives, increasing attendance, but also letting people know that the park is available, or if there's a reason that people aren't attending the park, which might go into our problem and our needs statement, then our objective could be to ameliorate that. So we got to describe what we're doing and how those activities link to the objective. The supporting activity links to the objective, and how that objective links to the major goal. Now, these three things here, goal, objective, activity, these all are components of what we call a logic model, where you take the resources that you have, apply them to certain activities, and then the logic is, if I do these activities, then I can produce these outputs. And if I produce these outputs, like, well, I'm not going to give an example right there, but if I produce these outputs, then I can say that, yes, I have achieved success in this outcome that I'm looking for. The outcome may be I'm trying to increase park attendance. The outcome may be I am trying to make the park a more aesthetically pleasing place. So some outputs that you'd be looking for would be attendance or survey responses from individuals who have visited the park. The implementation timeline is part of the evaluation plan. Funders need to know how you're going to know the project is successful, so that you can explain to them, you gave us $10,000 for this project. We turned that $10,000 into success this way. So the evaluation, there are many types of evaluations, and we will get very deep into evaluations and logic models in Grants 201. I mean, I'm going to be spending a lot of time talking about that in Grants 201. So please be sure to take part in that. But basically, the evaluation is a before and after snapshot. And we'll talk about that in the next slide. And then finally, in this section of the program design, you want to explain the budget. Now, there's probably going to be a whole section for the budget and an addendum that you attach, but you could briefly explain how you intend to spend, like generally how you intend to spend your funds, what the breakdown between in-kind and requested funds are, and what have you. But yeah, this is the best way, or best place here to program design is the best place to clearly explain what your program does, how it's going to work, what activities are part of it, and how they support the objective, and how those objectives lead you to realizing your ultimate outcome. Anybody have any questions or comments for this before I move on? Very nice. Okay. So project evaluation. How do you know your plan? How do you know your program worked? How do we know? How will we know this Grants 101 session has been successful in giving you all the information and confidence that you need to go out and write a grant, or at least start on a grant proposal? Well, the way that we've done it is we've already done the data collection on the front end. We asked you all, how many of y'all have written a grant before? We asked you all, how many of y'all are nonprofits? How many of y'all are businesses? How many of y'all are doing this for personal reasons? And then we're not doing like I mean, I guess I could just say, show of hands, who's feeling more confident? But that would be the type of process evaluation. It could be as simple as that. It could be as simple as that. But the key thing here is that you take a measurement before the program happens, before your project starts, so that you can have a benchmark or a baseline from which to measure any differences, any changes that may have happened as a result of your activities. And this is the key goal of an evaluation, is to explain to anybody, to yourself, to your funders, to any stakeholder that has any part in this project, whether or not it's going successfully, going the way it's intended. Bless you. And then finally, the last part here is the last measurement would be taken after everything is said and done. So you did your before, and we interviewed you all, and we said, how many of y'all have written a grant before? How many of y'all have, well, we could do some sentiment analysis and ask you all how you feel about writing a grant. And then afterwards, we can ask you again how you feel about writing a grant. And we can see some changes in responses between when we started at 8:30 and when we end this at 12 o'clock, and maybe, or whenever we end this. And then if there is any change, then we can say, yes, success, or no, not success, and then course correct. That's part of the continuous quality improvement process right there. I don't want to get too deep into project evaluation, but I will be, I do have, if you all have questions about other evaluations and how to do this even more deeply outside of Grants 201, or before we get to Grants 201, please let me know. You can contact me.
All right, thank you, James Michael. So talking about the money part. So key things to mention here in terms of funding and sustainability. You want to make sure that you show the funder that you have future funding planned and that your organization has the sustainability to keep going once project begins. Are there other funders? Rarely does a funder want to be the only funder funding a program. They don't want to be the only funder, the only person on your dance card. They want to know that you are stocking your dance card with other dancers to help you in getting through this waltz or whatever metaphor you may wish to choose, because it is sometimes a dance. They need to see others. And so you would list that in your budget. And we'll talk about this in a minute, but you would list in the budget the funding that you have already been promised. And so you give that amount. And if you have an application or proposals out there, then you would list the amount that you wrote the proposal for. For instance, if you wrote a proposal for $10,000, does not mean that you may get awarded, but you may not be awarded the whole 10,000. You might be awarded, say, 8,000. And so, but if you have a proposal out there for $10,000, then that's the amount that you would put on your budget with that funder's name. And so, and we're going to talk about that in the next slide, I think it is. So also showing your long-term plan for sustainability. The funders want to know that your organization will last longer than the project or program. And they want to know that you're going to continue even if they deny you funding, because sometimes it has nothing to do with you or your organization or your grant. Sometimes it has to do with timing on their part and other criteria that they have to complete and fulfill. And so that's why it's important to have a diverse funding stream for support to be continued. And so now key terms that you will need to know in your project budget are personnel and non-personnel. So these are personnel are staff or people working on the program or project. Non-personnel is everything else. So direct and indirect costs. These are direct, might be your supplies or equipment, or materials or staffing. Your indirect costs are going to be your overhead expenses, such as your electricity, your rent, or general and administrative expenses. Supplies and equipment are the things that you need to conduct your program or project and the equipment to carry that out. So it may be perhaps you need a new vehicle or perhaps another specific piece of equipment. I know that we wrote a grant for a 3D printer and we were awarded that grant. And so if you need something specific to ensure that your program or project is handled successfully, make sure that you mention that and give details as to why that is necessary. And so, and also a word about this, everything on your budget should be mentioned or listed in your narrative. You don't want the funder to come to an item on the budget and say, well, how is this? This is a surprise. We didn't see anything about this in the narrative. You're going to want they need to see that in the narrative, and vice versa. You don't want something on the narrative that doesn't make it to the budget, because if it happens later that you need funding for that piece that didn't make it on the budget, you have to make that phone call to them. And so you want to make sure that everything that's listed in the narrative makes it to the budget as well. And so looking at how much things will cost or how much will be paid, take a look at the next slide. So on this sample budget that we have here, you want to show all revenue sources. In this scenario, we have three, one from Foundation A, who has already confirmed and agreed to give us $2,000. Foundation B, we have a grant proposal out there to them for $4,000, and so we list the $4,000 because that's what we wrote the proposal for, but we don't know if we'll get the whole $4,000. And they are in the process of making that decision. You would also list your in-kind revenue. And so that is what in-kind means. This is your match. This is what will show the funder how you are contributing to a project. And so this may be cash, but it may not, but usually it doesn't always cash. It can also be your volunteers. So if you are, let's say you were having a park cleanup day, or maybe even over a weekend, and let's say that you have 10 volunteers who have said, yep, you can count on me, I'll be there. And they are each going to give, let's say, 10 hours of volunteer labor. then right now you would have a look at independentsector.org, and we've done that for you at this point, but this changes annually. Right now, the hourly amount that you can account for volunteers is $28.54. That's a lot of money for our volunteers. Now, the volunteers are not being paid that, but that is what their labor is worth per hour as of right now at Independent Sector. So you would list that. So if you have 10 volunteers at $28.54 an hour, working 10 hours, then that is $285.40. So then you would times that. So that's for 10 hours. You would times that by the number of volunteers, which is 10. So the total of that would be $2,854. So that is going to go under your in-kind for volunteerism. Also, you may have other things that you're contributing. You may have, let's say, $10,000 from your own budget that you want to put towards this project. And so you would add up together all of your in-kind and show that to the funder. So moving on down to your expenses, again, the funder does not want any surprises. And so you'll want to spell out exactly what it is that you're asking them for. So we have labor, we have equipment, we have materials, we have supplies, and we have evaluation surveys, just like James Michael was saying a minute ago about surveys. So, and we also give details about what those are. Now, on this particular sample budget, we've listed those details on the line next to it. You may also have a narrative, which would be another column at the end of your budget on the right-hand side, and that's where you can give just a few words, a few sentences about your budget narrative. It is not as long as your regular the proposal narrative. In fact, they would not be happy if it were that long. It's just a few, like I said, a few words, a few sentences, like we've done here. So you can also see we've got our total costs that come to $10,000. We've listed our in-kind, and that we are going to toss in $4,000 towards this. And we also, but we would like our grant request to be $4,000. Now, obviously the difference between 10 and 4 is 6. So chances are what's happened here is you can see equipment, we've got $2,000 for a grant request. We've got $500 on the grant request for materials. And so, but we haven't necessarily listed an in-kind, and that's okay. It may be that you already have some other materials and that you only need to supplement what you already have. And so it may not be necessarily listed out there, but you're going to contribute. If they pay that $500, you're going to put that towards those materials and the supplies and evaluation survey. So this is what's also going to be reflected in your final report that you will give at the end of the grant cycle. Maybe, like we said, maybe a school year, maybe in 2 years from now. And your final report, you're going to show what you spent that money on. And so it will, it may match this exactly. There may be some tweaks to it because, and I'll talk about the relationship with your program officer in a minute, but that's going to be very important, is having that relationship with your program officer in case you need to make changes to your budget. And so, all right, I think that we've covered that slide. All right, next slide, please. All right, and Allison is here to talk to you about supporting documents.
Okay, Bree, you can go ahead and click through for this slide. So supporting documents are going to be something that you might not necessarily see the same thing for any grant you are applying for, but we're just giving you some examples of things that you might run into. So the first one is going to be your 501c3 determination letter. And that's going to be a document that comes from the IRS that shows that you and your organization are a nonprofit, and funders are going to want to see that. So something else that you might run into, and Bree, you can click through the whole thing. There's a bunch of them. So one of the other things that you might run into is a request to see your recent audits. And that one sounds a little weird, but trust me, it's not that bad. So the recent audits are going to be kind of just documents that support that your auditors have looked over kind of your processes, and they've made sure that everything you've done is legal, and that they just show that where your funding is coming from and how you're using it. So it's just really solidifying that relationship. Like, you know what you're doing with the money you've been given, You know how to spend it, you know to make sure it evens out. It really just kind of gives you credibility. Some things you, again, might not see very often, but could run into are board lists and staff lists. Your board list is just going to show who your board of directors are. You know, it's going to be, these are the leaders of your organization. And, you know, it could show whether or not you have diversity in your leaderboard or board of leaders. In which that could be something that funders really want to know. They want to know who the leaders of your organization are if you do have a board list. As far as the staff list goes, that's going to show your funders, you know, who works for you, who's going to be working on this project, what hands are going to be touching this project. And it just gives credibility to, you know, these are the people, this is what they do for my organization, this is who is helping on this project. Something else that could be super helpful to add, even if it's not asked for, are going to be letters of support. And kind of think of those like letters of recommendation, whether you're maybe applying for a job or if you know, looked for a letter of recommendation if you were applying for college. And they do the exact same thing. So that's going to be a letter of support from another organization you may work with that just gives support and gives credibility to who you are and what your organization does. It'd be really great if you kind of solidify, or excuse me, if you added, you know, other organizations that you have done projects with or organizations that have been affected by projects you've done. Those are going to be great people to kind of reach out to and say, hey, would you mind writing a letter of support because I am applying for this program and maybe this program could affect you as well. So we could work together, kind of thing. Lastly, kind of some other, they're not always asked for, but some things to consider maybe as additional documents. You can add press releases or, you know, digital kind of photography and videography. Those kinds of things really just add that visual aspect to all the writing and the storytelling you've already done. And it gives that extra, I hate continuing to use the word support, but it adds that extra credibility. You know, this is the thing of a physical representation of what you have done in the past. It shows, literally shows that you have the ability to do the things that you are promising to do in your proposal. So you can go ahead and move on to the next slide.
All right, thank you, Allison. So the question, I'm sure that is always uppermost in our minds, why do proposals fail? Why did my proposal fail? Arg. Well, there are some common mistakes, such as a failure to follow directions.
Hey, Sharima.
Yes.
Real quick, before you get too far into this slide, there appears to be a question in the chat for Allison's slide.
Well, very good.
Allison Christina asks, is it helpful to include resumes or summaries of qualifications for your staff in this part, or are they generally just looking for that and for this in list form?
That's a really great question. And summaries of qualifications. I would probably say more the summary piece of qualifications. If they would like to see resumes, you can say, oh, resume available upon request, but maybe some summaries of the qualifications. That's a really important piece. In fact, actually, yes, there can be a section in your grant. It'll be before the end, where you will actually list the directors, list the people who are going to be involved in the project or the program. So if you have the executive director, you might have the program director, you might have maybe the accounting person's name, and you might have the project manager. So you'll have a brief bio in your project, in the grant narrative itself, about who is going to be running the program or the project. And it can just be a few sentences, maybe a brief paragraph about that person, just listing their background and then listing what they will be doing in accordance with that program or project. Thank you, Christina, for your question. Very good. All right. So incomplete. So why do proposals fail? Some of them may be things that are totally avoidable on our part. Like I said, you want to get it to a point where you have checked everything, you've checked every box. And so perhaps it was an incomplete application. And so you might want to have someone, you probably will want to have someone come behind you to read through the application very carefully. I remember when I was writing grants for another organization, when the grant was finished, the executive director and I would sit down in a meeting and she would read it aloud while I carefully read along with her, and I could fix things as she read them out loud. And so that was a very collaborative way of making sure that everything was done in the grant. And so failure to follow word limits. And now if you're on an online form, then that's going to give you your word limits. And sometimes they give you only characters. So you'll want to be careful with that. And also know that if you're writing the grant, say in a Word doc, that even when you do the word and it's a section of only 500 words are allowed and you've written 500 words, sometimes your form is going to think of that as 503 words or 505 words. And so you've got to get it down. Sometimes the word count does not match the online portal count, unfortunately. And so looking at that. Also following the formatting, that's a really important piece. And if they provide a template, always use their template. And including the required documentation, like Allison was going over the supporting documents. They will usually tell you what they want to see, whether that's your Form 990, your audit, letters of support, or whatnot. Make sure you include all of the required documentation. Another common mistake is with funding not relevant. So sometimes the failure to review eligibility criteria. And this comes back to the research that I spoke of earlier, making sure that you're eligible, making sure that your program or project are eligible for this particular funder. Completely, and this is where you want to completely research that funder. And so in matching your proposal so that you are able to deliver on what you're promising to them and that your missions and vision and values will match. Sometimes it's a submission during the funding period or failure to submit during the funding period. Sometimes that will happen as well. And if it's outside the funder's geographic focus, like I've already said, making sure that you are within their geography. Some funders, if you're looking nationally, will only fund organizations in certain states. If you're looking at the state level, they may fund organizations only in certain counties. And so make sure that you are within the purview of their geographical focus. And make sure that the amount you're asking for is within the amount that they are giving. Sometimes if you might say, okay, I want to ask for $10,000, but they're only giving $8,000, well, then your grant is already on the scrap pile and that could be the only reason. And so you want to make sure you are asking for the amount that is at the ceiling or below it, never above it. And so, all right, another common mistake is with funder relations. So failing to contact the funding officer. I mentioned a minute ago about the program officer. This person is the person who is assigned to your grant proposal by the funding organization. And that person is who you will build your relationship with. And it's very important to build a relationship with your funding officer. So knowing their name and their contact information, reaching out to them when you have questions, maybe compile some questions and emails to send them, but making sure that they know who you are, not just the hello at the beginning and the, okay, it's submitted at the end. You want to have conversations in between. And so, and this will also, another reason is last minute applications. And so I had a situation where I wrote the grant, everything was great. I was submitting it. This particular funder was launching a brand new online portal for this particular RFP. And we were all there first for this particular online portal. And at 10 minutes to 5 o'clock, 5 o'clock was the deadline. 10 minutes to 5 o'clock, I hit submit, which was already a little bit late. You really want to get an hour up to or a day up to. 10 minutes, I hit submit and nothing happened. And come to find out, their portal was there were some pieces of information that needed to be garnered. I called the program officer. 5 o'clock came and went, and she helped me. She sent an email saying, I'm on the phone with her right now. She said, don't worry, it'll be submitted. But because it was a brand new online portal, they did not accept it. And in fact, I had to hit submit again at 5 o'clock with her help, but on their side, it said 5:01. And so the grant was not accepted. So,
Sure.
yes.
Sorry to interrupt, but I just
Right.
wanted to say that if you did not have a relationship with this grant officer, this could have all ended up very differently.
Yeah, exactly. And the program and the grant officer, when she and I we've compared notes since then, and she says that that was a moment for her too. It was a very difficult time. So it was not a happy story, and I smile about it now, but that's a story that you want to try to avoid. So, you know, being able to manage your time, like I said, trying to get the grant in an hour earlier before the deadline, even rather than right up to it, is always a best practice. And so, and like James Michael said, you know, having that relationship too, you know, and another piece is failing to update the funder during the funding period. And so, like I said, I was on the phone with our program officer at that moment. So she was very updated. And so, but you want to get them up to that point. You also want to be working with them and updating them. Another common mistake is in the details. So this might be poor writing. So this is where you have, you know, somebody coming behind you. Bree, if you want to select the next point there. Thank you. Poor writing. That's another thing that you want to have someone do. If someone's coming behind you to read over your grant before it's submitted, they can also point out pieces where, oh, this sentence might be a little bit clunky, or we want to reword it here or there, or, you know, try grammar, check out your there. And so, you know, making sure that the writing is well done. Sometimes it's an unbaked concept, unbaked, quote unquote, whereas perhaps it's not quite well thought out. Perhaps some information wasn't given to the grant writer that the program officer, you know, might have thought that they had conveyed, but maybe they didn't. And so that can come out as well. And again, if you have someone coming behind you to read it, they can kind of suss that out for you, or alongside with you. Sometimes it's a lack of evidence of experience. So that's where you want to really highlight your evidence of experience. And that, you know, in terms of that, and that's why partnerships are really good. If you know that you want to do this, but you know that you or your organization maybe don't have that experience, that's where finding a partner, maybe write the grant with a partnering organization who does have that experience, and that will up their chances even more of getting the grant. And a lack of evidence of results. This goes back to what James Michael was talking about in terms of the metrics, and a lack of evidence of results. Maybe previously you're writing a proposal for an already established program or project, but it maybe hasn't given the results that the originators believed that it would. So these are things that, you know, evaluation, like we said, we will go over that in 201. But those results are really important to show, that you can show that, yes, these are the results of the program thus far, and this is what we're expecting for this coming year. And an evaluation will help you be able to convey that. And then the final common mistake, or a final common mistake, is in the financial. So lack of a 501c3 or fiscal sponsor. Bree, if you want to just select that next piece there. So like we said before, having a fiduciary or a fiscal sponsor will help you very much, especially if you don't have a 501c3 as of yet. Maybe your budget, or if your budget lacks specificity. As I said before, you want to make sure that everything that's in your narrative appears on your budget, and vice versa. Don't let something come to the budget that's not in the narrative. So you want to be specific. We talked about that already. And that maybe you've budgeted for unallowable items. As I mentioned before, I was writing a grant for computers, and come to find out a funder did not allow for computers. Thankfully, I discovered that before I applied to that funder. But sometimes that may happen, that may get missed, that you've got something on the budget that they don't allow for. And so, all right. And so then the next point, Bree, if you could please. Is attitude. And so being mindful of, you're here in the community as well. And if your funder is too, or if your funder has connections to the community, it's probably not a best practice to contact them and say, why didn't I get funded? We want to be careful, and I think Allison said it already before, no one is entitled to a grant. It is a highly competitive process. And so, and we're all here to try to make positive impacts in each in their own way, including our funders. And so if you're you're looking at whether it's someone local or someone national, it's a good idea to let it settle for a day or two, and maybe even have someone else present when you might make that phone call, because you can make the phone call. It's just the way that it's handled is always important, and having that having that attitude, a good attitude, and know that there's always other funders. There's always other funders. And so when you make that phone call, you could actually say to them, would you be willing to sit down and talk with us about how we could make our grant proposal stronger? Was it lacking in something? Did we need to add something that was missing? Did we add something that we shouldn't have added? And you can have that conversation with them. And that is a really beneficial conversation to have, because then you can rewrite it and maybe resubmit it in their next grant cycle, or you can rewrite it and submit it to somebody else. It makes it stronger. And so, attitude, and just having a positive attitude about it, you will get funded. You're going to cast your net and you're going to catch a fish. So, all right. So our next slide, please. And James Michael.
Yes, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, thank you. So I have some data sources here that will be helpful in strengthening your proposals. Also, when you're making your needs statements, if you're trying to get that baseline information, benchmark information. So these are resources that I use personally in my work. Whenever I get a data request or and needed to pull some information for a project that maybe Shreem was working on, we often use, so let me just stop. We have the national data here, we have local data here. And so I have the Census Bureau and a few different studies under the Census Bureau. You can access this at census.gov. The decennial, I'm not sure how you say that, but the 10-year census has just completed. And so new data is coming out that will be used to make predictions for the next 10 years until the next 10-year census is done. But in the meantime, we also have the American Community Surveys that make 1-year and 5-year estimates. And those are surveys that provide information about general households across the country. The annual economic census is something that's more useful for economics, businesses looking at the sizes of companies in your area. They provide a general snapshot of what the economic outlook for your area is. But segue into economics, FRED, or the Federal Reserve Economic Data, is a depository of all kinds of labor, unemployment, income, wages, and businesses as well. But they also provide just some pretty basic information about well, anything you're looking for, honestly. They're very well connected. And then CDC-Gov, Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, National Vital Statistics System. If you're trying to, like, I don't know, I did a park project back in my master's program, and I needed to use the CDC data in order to make some statements about the general health conditions of people in certain neighborhoods in Wayne County. Now, I could have also gone to the local side, and I did, and looked at the Wayne County Health Department's annual health needs assessment. But what we have posted here, keeping it local, is the Genesee County Health Department. They have all the information you'll need regarding COVID, but also a bunch of other things: birth, death, population statistics, and common health needs that are specific to our area. So supposing you're hoping to affect some good change, there are some issues. There are some health issues, access to healthcare that is also outlined in the Genesee County Health Need Assessment. But all of these can be, Michigan.gov, if you just Google grants for Michigan, Michigan.gov, like the state of Michigan actually has a funding opportunities document. This is something aside to what Sharima was also saying very earlier on, but there's a whole list of different funding opportunities on that document as well. And finally, well, 2 points to make. First point is Michigan labor market information is where I go. The first place I go if I'm trying to find any information related to the county or to Flint. I have a contact there in the Department of Technology Management and Budget. His name is Dylan Schaefer. He is the resource person for our region, which is Region 6, I believe. So if you do have any questions, Dylan is very helpful. And usually he'll get back to you within 48 to 72 hours or 3 business days, whatever. And usually he has the answer. And if he doesn't, then he'll say he doesn't. And you can trust that you might need to go to a national source to look at the data you're trying to find. Finally, the Michigan e-library grants. Anybody with the Michigan driver's license, all you need is your driver's license number, and you'll be able to get access to a lot of journals that provide access to scholarly research. So it's not just you saying, I think that if I do this, then we're going to have some good results. But you can also say, I agree with all these other researchers from all these other universities who have already done these randomized control trials, and they found that if I do this in a similar situation, then I'll be able to produce these results or produce these desired outcomes. So it's just another way of strengthening your arguments, strengthening any statement that you are assuming to be true. If you assume it to be true, then there should be data there to back it up. And if not, then you might be able to create that data by just keeping track in your own program.
And James Michael, if I may interject too, what James Michael is talking about is citations. Doing the research and citing your sources. It's really important to do that. And in a grant, it may be slightly different from citing for academic papers, although it could be the same. I do cite mine as if I'm citing for academic papers, but I also may cite in parenthetical references. I may also say according to such and such. And so it's always really important to show where your sources are and where they came from, because just as in academia, our funders too, they want to know where those data sources are from, and they want to look at them as well. And so always citing your sources, but like James Michael said, finding those scholarly journals are really important, as well as other sources too, like I've already mentioned, former, old newspaper articles, or even current newspaper articles. I use a lot from MLive or the Flint Journal, and so on. But yes, so the scholarly articles and the Michigan e-library is an excellent source for that. Thank you.
Any questions? Does anybody have any comments to make? All right, well, I am looking at the chat, so keep them coming. Next slide, please. Ooh, this is a fun activity. Y'all are gonna really enjoy this.
Yes, we are going to do fund or not fund. So we're kind of gonna flip the script here now that all of you know how to write a grant. And we're gonna have you guys play the role of program officer for the funder. So we're going to review a couple of examples. We're not gonna probably get through all of them for time's sake, but a couple of them. We're going to have you review a couple of examples of grant submissions, and utilizing what we've learned today, we're going to take a couple minutes to read them, and we are going to kind of have open discussion on what might be great about them, what might be some missteps, what could be changed. And then at the end of each example, we are going to decide as a group whether or not we're going to fund this proposal. So if we want to go ahead and move on to the first one. or I guess there's two, and go ahead and just take a little bit of time to read this to yourselves. And once we've read through it, go ahead and I will open floor for discussion. And why don't we actually have people come off mute to kind of have that more flowy discussion. So go ahead and I'll give you guys a couple minutes to read this. Okay. So who would like to kind of jumpstart? We're going to focus on number one, the what type of project is your group requesting funding to complete? And the floor is open. If anyone has any comments or things they noticed about it, come off mute and let me know.
I, for one, was very uncomfortable reading some of these, just saying.
I didn't want to be the first one to say it.
I want to say it's all over the place to me.
Yes.
I'm trying to read. I'm like, A, where's B? Leaning, mowing. Yes, I would say a big no. Redo over.
It says that it's looking for funding for a safe environment, but it doesn't really speak to the safety element other than like there was like, what was it? It was maybe a light in there somewhere. Yeah, like safe lights and cameras. But I don't know what that has to do with vegetables and flowers and green space and green collar jobs. I was very confused.
Sure.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think some of these mistakes can be forgiven. It's just the overall idea behind it is not fully realized as to why it's exactly needed.
Sure. And Sharima brought this up several times, you know, having someone else read over your things with you would help prevent these kinds of problems. So Bree, if you want to start clicking through, I mean, one of the first things we notice, you know, and a lot of you have mentioned, there's not great grammar in a lot of these things in this proposal. So things that we could do to kind of reinforce, you know, making it more of a solid idea, just have someone look over your shoulder. Bree, if you want to click through them, actually, we've got some misspelled words. I know me, I spell environment wrong all the time. So make sure your spell check is on. And we've said it sounds like a decent idea, but the concept and how they're going to achieve it needs to be fleshed out more. Incomplete sentences, those are going to bite you. Make sure you have a full thought out sentence. And when you're talking about lower income communities are burdened with less healthy environment, where's the data to support that? You need the data.
Who?
Like
it
says
definition.
Who?
What does less healthy environment mean? Exactly.
That is a fantastic point. What does that mean? What are you trying to solve and how are you trying to solve that? So it's and I use this a lot, so I apologize, but it's solidifying and making your proposal more concrete when you sound like you know what you're talking about and you're using data to support it and you're doing it in complete sentences. So if we want to move on to the next one, we'll do kind of a similar situation. So take a minute or so, read over this, and we'll come back and have a discussion again. Okay, I know that one was a little quick, so if you're not done reading, I do apologize. But what are some things with this one that you guys are noticing? Good, bad, yes or no? What do we think?
I would say it's much better written, but it still is not specific enough to funding. Why do you have a cost to have a community meeting when possibly you could meet at a church? Are you going to serve coffee and donuts or what? But it's better written than the last one, but still not thorough enough to say, yes, I'd like to fund you.
Yeah, you're noticing a lot of the things that I noticed when I first read it. I think I remember asking Eric, I was like, what are they asking for?
What's the actual project?
Right, what is the project? Because in like you had brought up, why do you need funding to hold a meeting? So Bree, if you want to click through some of these, we did say that the sentences were a little better, but there's still not a fully fleshed out idea here. So it's really just taking the time to come up with a well thought out program. And maybe some way you could do this is try to explain it to someone who has no idea of what you're trying to propose. And if they can understand it in the way that you're presenting it, that could be a good first step to know that you're kind of on the right track. If they get what you're doing, your funder might get what you're doing. So this one did use some specific information and some data collection, at least as far as plan wise. So that's helpful, but still it just really needs more full fleshed out ideas. And there were a couple grammar kind of weird spots. So just having that other person read it or having your spell check on, those will be a lifesaver. So we will go ahead and skip the next one for sake of time, and I will pass it on.
This is the after measurement, but just to give you all a chance to reflect and also give us something to work with as well, part of our continuous quality improvement process. I would like each person, so if you haven't had a chance to speak yet, because we just haven't given you a chance, now is your opportunity to really shine and make that impression. I would like you all just to reintroduce yourself and the organization that you're from, but then say in one word how you're feeling about writing grants, about this Grants 101 class, and yeah, just one word. What are your impressions? I might call
Does it matter who go? Or...
Oh, you can start.
Okay.
Right on. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. My name is LaShonda Brown. I am the Business Development Manager with Charter Healthcare Training Center. The first thing that comes to mind, one word with me, is still, I would say nervous. And I would say that because this is all like brand new to me. I actually thought it was a lot worse than what it really is. So I have learned a lot. I still think I need a little bit more help and guidance on some things, but I feel a lot more confident now as me working up to this day. So
certainly. Thank you for sharing.
You're welcome.
And I see in the chat, Samuel also said, use 2 words, but that's fine. Better prepared. So we got nervous, got better prepared.
I'm Christina Church. I'm the Community Relationship Representative for Algo Credit Union. And in one word, I would also say prepared. I've done a lot of writing, but it's been more media-focused writing or community-focused writing. And this has really given me a good outline when we do get started with some grants on how to be specific in what information funders are looking for versus more of a community narrative. So thank you.
Thank you for sharing and thank you for being here. Okay.
I'm just going to say my word is specific. Well, overall, it's wonderful. Everything you've said, I've learned a lot. But one of my problems is I like to take notes because I know I'm not going to remember it all. And the slide is up there, not here. You've got the the description, but not specifics underneath that we're trying to write. And at the same time, I'm losing what you're saying, but don't want to lose what you said. Does that sound correct?
That does sound correct. And to help out with that, we're also going to be releasing a recording of this presentation. So if there's something that we said too quickly, and you weren't able to catch that, just press rewind.
You're forgiven. Go for it.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And I'd also like to make a note that we are the grants team at the Flint and Genesee group. We are here to serve the community. We do have full-time jobs, but if there are ways that we can assist you all, please do feel free, like, don't hesitate, reach out to us. I know that I can give at least an hour of my time to some people if they need help. I've assisted with other grants in the past. And if not, like, I'm not going to write the grant for you, but I'll read it over for you. And I'll also provide my feedback as well.
Yes, and same, alongside James Michael, I'm very happy to meet with anyone. If we can talk for an hour, as I told my group in the breakout session, that this is my happy time. I love brainstorming and talking about the grants, the projects that you might have, the programs that you're looking for funding for. We can do Google searches together and ascertain. May not necessarily be able to assist you with the writing of the grant. Our plates are very full, but that's why we do these, like Bree said at the beginning, that's why we do these workshops, is to help you and to be able to find your funding. But we are very happy to sit with you and talk too. But I'd love to be able to garner some more of the one-word responses. We do have a little bit of time left. The workshop usually goes until about 11:30. And so, but I thought maybe we could also use the time to maybe talk about maybe some other. I love what LaShonda Brown was talking about, her nervousness, and I'm sure LaShonda is not alone. And so we'd love to be able to talk a little bit more about that as well. And so, anyone else wanted to offer your one word?
Sure. Hi, I'm Jason Briggs. I'm with the Flint Institute of Music, and I'm the development officer and audience engagement manager for the Flint Repertory Theater, which is one of our programs. So my one word is enlightened. You kind of think, like, when you're in the grant process, like, why can't I just get this money? Like, why can't I get this and that for my theater? And there's so much that goes into it. And I just feel like if I could, I would reach out right now and give my grant writer, Shan, a big hug, because the things that you have to go through, Shan, to get these grants is like way more than I ever could have imagined. So it really makes me appreciate having a grant writer in our organization at Flint Institute of Music. So thank God we have Shan.
I would also mention that last Wednesday was Administrative Professionals Day. So just
wait, am I included in that? Because I didn't get it.
Yeah, but when is Administrative Superheroes Day? Because then we'll celebrate Shane.
There you go. The big A on your chest.
That's right.
Thanks, Jay.
Oh.
I'll bounce back off of that. My name is Brianne. I'm also with the Flint Institute of Music. I'm the department chair of music therapy, kind of on the Flint School of Performing Arts side of things. And in one word, I would probably say programming. I so much better understand just the exact specifics and the format and the flow of exactly what needs to go where and why it needs to go where. I feel like, once again, Shan is amazing, and I'm so glad we have Shan. And I can't imagine having to do all this. And I feel like now I can much better help give Shan the information she needs to compile all this because of this.
I think that is actually a really good takeaway from this, because even if you don't write grants, like, you know what the grant writer needs now, you know what funders are looking for, or you have a better, to take Samuel's words, you're better prepared.
And specifically to that's a great point, that programming piece, because we have so many different programs, and just really I think for me, it's going to help me get like right off the jump, say, oh, I don't know if that's going to work, or we need to be more specific with what exactly we want for the program, like the specificity of the programming.
Yeah. Good intentions can't be enough. You got to have a good plan too.
Right.
Yeah.
So Shan, what is it like to hear these wonderful, wonderful flowers being given to you by your colleagues?
You have no idea how big my smile is right now. We were saying it in our breakout group. She's like, do you have any experience writing grants, and how long have you? And I said, look, I've been doing this for 11 years. I really am just here to support my team. But the whole point, and I know that Brianna was like, why are you registering so many of your people? But it's because my position was created when I came to FIM. So I've had to build everything around my position that is in, my center of the world. And so this was really about being able to have people in place who understand what I do enough to actually be helpful in getting it done, and why this is so important to our agency. And so it's very, 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 very great to be able to hear that, my people are listening and they understand that this isn't as easy. Like, there are people who truly believe that I sneeze and money comes out.
I love that. Yes. They don't know the process.
That's how it works. And then they'll go,
you don't have the money sneeze?
I wish I had a money sneeze, right?
You have
Man,
the secret to the money
sneeze. Oh, man.
And then there are other people who feel like, once I get the check, the work is done and they can do whatever they want to with the money. And that's just not a thing.
Exactly. Oh, and then you have to be the gatekeeper for the money and how it gets spent.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Yes, ma'am. So it's wonderful to hear all these flowers. It really is.
That's awesome. It's just great that message received that your colleagues understand the process or have an idea now of the process that it takes. And so, oh, that's fantastic. Wow. Thank y'all for sharing. All right. Someone else?
Another one from FIM here, just feel more knowledgeable about the process with grant writing and reporting, and more thanks to Shan, and cheers for her and everything that she does.
Yes. It's awesome.
I would just like to add a comment. I feel like I don't even know Shan, but I feel like I do after this point. I'm like, she's a hard worker. So I got that out of the Zoom today, and sounds like a really, really good team. Just from my angle, from where I'm sitting at. So I'm looking forward of the same thing going here at Charter Healthcare Training Center. So
yeah.
Thank you, Ms. Brown.
You're very welcome.
Well, and LaShonda brings up a wonderful point, because that's another piece to why we do these workshops, is for networking. And she mentioned she doesn't even know Shan Buckley at this point, but that may be a wonderful connection the two of you can make to reach out at your organizations and connect about this. And there's mentorship here. Like James Michael said, we're happy to spend an hour here and there with members of the community. There's mentorship involved, and I like to call it brainstorming, and because it is, sometimes it's more storm than braining, but you never know what you come up with, and it's really awesome things that you learn together.
Yes.
Yeah, it is about each other's industries, and also about the funding opportunities that are out there. I enjoy it very much.